Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description. Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. We're recording this episode after United's 3-0 defeat to Manchester City in the derby on Sunday afternoon. I am joined by Samuel Luckhurst, as always. Samuel, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I suppose it's not the city isn't red on this occasion. It's the cliched Blue Monday. So we'll have to get stuck into yet another United inquest at this early stage of the season.
The podcast was well named after December's win at the Etihad, but sadly United weren't able to produce a win this time around this season. But before we get into the football, Samuel, I thought we'd just start with a quick word to Ricky Hatton, because really sad news to wake up on Sunday morning to and see that a legendary icon in Manchester, both sides of the city. If you're blue or you're red, you had a lot of love for Hatton because of who he was, a real working class icon and a proper Mancunian due to his boxing exploits. Really sad news, wasn't it? And there was a rousing tribute. I think you said that, a beautiful tribute to Hatton before the game with a minute's applause, and it was really nice to see that, wasn't it?
It is, and really when you're at a derby, it's quite meaningful anyway, writing for the MEN, but the MEN had quite a special attachment to him. Not only was it a big champion of Ricky Hatton's, but also he did used to do a column for the MEN. And yesterday again was a day that I was proud to represent the MEN because of how they handled an unimaginably sad situation and news story that I received a message from someone actually that alerted me to unfortunately the fact that he'd passed away. And when I got that, sadly it wasn't hugely surprising because he was someone who had his demons, but listening to far more authoritative voices like Steve Bunce on the radio driving to the ground yesterday, they said how well he looked. It was the best he looked in 15 years. So I think people who actually knew him well and were far more clued up on where his life was going and the state his life was in were shocked and were surprised. But that minute's applause yesterday is probably the most charged and emotional and raucous that I've ever experienced at a match. And there was this added poignance that he died on Derby Day. Strangely, it's a strange thing to say in a way, but it absolutely fueled that appreciation for his life and what he did as a professional boxer. And growing up, I remember him. Everyone knew about his City allegiance. I remember one time on the morning of, I think it was the final Main Road derby in 2002, and he was gearing up for a fight, and they had him on Soccer AM and asked for his prediction, and he said, "I'm going to go for 2-2, 2 for Gota, 2 for Anelka." And it wasn't a bad prediction because Sean Gota got 2 goals in that final derby and Nicolas Anelka got 1 goal. And City, of course, won 3-1. But I still vividly remember all the build-up to the Mayweather fight in December 2007 and the sheer number of boxing fans that went over to Las Vegas for that and how bullish Hatton was in the build-up to it. And I'm absolutely not someone who is a boxing fanatic, but certainly growing up, there was the occasional fight that did capture the imagination, and that was certainly one of them. And it was, in terms of the weigh-in, in terms of the build-up to it, I was tuned into it, and a big reason for that, probably the biggest reason for that, was Ricky Hatton. So it's extremely sad and an unimaginably sad situation for his family, and I genuinely hope they get all the love and support that they need and deserve.
Just 46 years old, so desperately sad, and as you've said, sending their love to his family at this very hard time. We'll move on to the football then. Another bad defeat for Ruben Amorim. 3-0. City took the lead in the first half. Erling Haaland scored twice, a brace in the second. We'll start with the first goal before getting into Amorim and individual performances, etc. Because Phil Foden scores, a Mancunian. He talked before the game actually about having added motivation for Ricky Hatton in his interview. There was a few moments when that goal could have been stopped because Patrick Dorgu and Luke Shaw definitely culpable in that goal. But I'm looking at it again, and I watched Match of the Day last night, and Bruno Fernandes, I can't not look at him because Phil Foden's over his left shoulder. He's obviously playing this deeper role. He loses his man, bursts into the box. Foden finds the back of the net. What was your reaction to that kind of first goal? We'll start with that.
Well, Fernandes has been at the scene of the crime a couple of times now. The Harry Wilson goal is one that immediately comes to mind. And I'm not quite as aghast that he's playing in midfield as others are, because you just look at United's midfield options, and I think that he and you look at the plethora of number 10s that they have. I think for the balance of the team, it is logical to have him there. But whoever he's paired with, it's not ideal. Ugarte came out of nowhere to go back into the team, and I thought he did quite respectably. But he's someone who is still quite naive the way he goes about playing as a defensive midfielder. And Fernandes all of a sudden is being expected to track back and follow runners, and he's not doing it. And that's not part of his game. I don't necessarily think that he should be expected to do that, but because he's someone who wants to cover every blade of grass, he's liable to be found in that position, and that's going to compromise his not his position in the team as such, but it's going to compromise people's perceptions of him and whether he should be playing in midfield or whether he should be playing further forward. And is it right that he's actually playing in this system at all, or should the system be changed to suit him? Again, Gary Neville touched upon that, saying that neither role that he plays in is going to suit him. But let's face it, this is a guy who, from the Liverpool Anfield game last season onwards, was in terrific form, and he played well in midfield and he played well as a number 10. So I don't think that he's necessarily the problem playing there. The problem is that structurally, United are just not very good. They don't have a designated out. They don't have a defensive midfielder who they know is going to start week in, week out. I think most people assumed that it would be Casemiro yesterday. Ugarte, having last been seen, sheltering from the rain in Grimsby in the main stand in Blundell Park, having been hooked at half-time, all of a sudden he's back in the starting 11. And I actually think he did quite respectably. I thought he was one of a couple of players who did okay, but it's still not enough when you end up losing 3-0. And of course, when the transfer window closed, United, again, very useful for us. It informs our reporting, gives us context on why this has happened, why this hasn't happened. They said that the midfield was not a priority. And you knew as soon as we were informed of their viewpoint on that, you knew that was going to come back to haunt them. And it's come back to haunt them quite quickly, because Amorim even said on Friday he doesn't know if there's the right midfield partner for Kobbie Mainoo, which I think is a very strange thing for a Manchester United manager to say when he's been there since November 11th. It's coming up to, well, it's just been 10 months in charge. He's not playing Mainoo, and there's a lot of mitigation for that. There's probably not much point even getting into that. But what Neville said that was correct is that City have the potential to have a really strong world-class spine from back to front. That is a big problem in this United side, that at times they will look quite decent, robust in central defence. I don't think that's the case in midfield. I think that's going to be a work in progress throughout the season. I'm not even necessarily sure there's a hidden solution there, just because they've got a paucity of options. Okay, they've got a plethora of good options to play as the two number 10s, but then the striker has had 7 games this season and he's still not scored in those 7 games for club and country. And so that, if you're in the midfield, that's going to have a knock-on effect. If the team's not scoring, which they're not, they've got 1 goal from open play in 6 hours of Premier League football, and they're quite porous to the point they're on minus goal difference again. It's -3, isn't it? And they've conceded 7 goals in 4 games. So that's not a flattering look. And if you're in midfield, you're going to cop flat for that, because you're not creating enough that's leading to goals, and you're not doing enough to help in terms of shielding the goalkeeper. I think at times, like the first goal that Burnley scored, people might have looked at. I mean, it was one of those where it's a runner who gets in unattended and scores with a first time finish, which was the case with Wilson's goal and the case with Foden's goal. I think with that cross, there were 3 centre backs there. One of them's got to be picking him up.
Are you referencing the Fulham game there? Sorry.
No, the Burnley game.
Right.
Burnley's first
I thought you were referencing Smith Rowe against Fulham's equaliser.
I said Harry Wilson, it was Smith Rowe.
That's what I thought you were saying, yeah. Just to correct, just for any listeners who are confused. A rare mistake from Samuel.
That mea culpa, that was my mistake. But yeah, Emile Smith Rowe, to clarify matters, was the goal scorer in the Fulham game. And then in the Burnley game, I look at that and I think that you've got 3 centre-halves there. If someone's coming in, they had time, I think, for one of them to at least pick up the guy. It's unforgivable that he was unmarked. But that was the problem looking at that goal yesterday. It was, the build-up was eminently avoidable. Dorgu hesitated when there was the switch of play, which was about 20 seconds, maybe not even that much before Foden actually scored. And he could have cut out that ball. And then Shaw had by far and away his worst game of the season. But that was always going to happen. You saw when he started the Europa League final, which I thought was absolutely the wrong decision, it backfired. And it was going to backfire at some point this season as well, because he is, as good as he has played at centre-back, in a back 3 and in a back 2, he is an auxiliary option there. And if you're pitting him against Erling Haaland, there's only ever going to be one winner. I think it's time to move Fernandes back up the pitch. You're right, there is structural problems there, and there's no perfect solution. But I just think he's really struggling with the role, the defensive aspects of the role. He struggles to pick up the runners behind him, doesn't he? Because he's not used to it. Of course he's not used to it. He's used to playing central number 10. Obviously, if he moves back up the pitch, he has to rotate with Mbeumo and Kuna. So it's not, again, a perfect solution. But I think it's probably time. And you mentioned Kobbie Mainoo briefly there. We won't get into him at length on this podcast, obviously, because he only came on in the second half. But a penny for his thoughts maybe in the first few weeks of the season? Because Amorim said he is competing with Fernandes. Fernandes has had a poor start to the season. He still can't play. He's still not getting in the starting team. So just something for Mainoo to think about. Let's get on to the second goal then. My reaction in the press box, and your reaction as well, because we both said it. Altay Bayındır, I thought, went down too easily, far too easily. I'm not going to blame him for the defeat because it was a poor team performance. But what I think is an important point is from the start of the game, I just thought he looked shaky. And I think when you've got a goalkeeper in a derby who's made a disappointing start of the season, he transmits nerves to the team. And I think he looked very, like, his confidence almost looked shattered. And there was one point after the third goal went in, I spotted him, Mbeumo was shouting at him, screaming at him from the halfway line, trying to tell him to keep his head up. And there was the players, his teammates, seemed to have to kind of get him up and G him up. That wouldn't have happened with Peter Schmeichel if he was in goal. He's got that personality, the character. You don't see that with Bayındır. He doesn't have that presence. And when you have a goalkeeper like that, and again, I will stress, he was not the biggest problem yesterday by any means. It doesn't help the team in big games like that. And then you look at the other side of the pitch, Donnarumma, experienced goalkeeper, has just been signed. He was fantastic and he made an immediate impact, didn't he? Amorim said on Friday to Sky that Bayındır can be like Van der Sar. He's not even as good as Van der Gaal, who was a number 2 goalie at United for 6 years. And the thing with Bayındır is that in terms of the confidence, when he actually arrives at a stadium, he exudes it because he's got that slick side parting. He was clutching I think it was a Louis Vuitton hold all over his shoulder, looking the part, looking confident. But then you put him on a football pitch, and it's the polar opposite. But that's not a surprise for Haaland's first goal yesterday. He shrank, and Donnarumma, in contrast, is such a giant of a keeper. He could block out the glare of the floodlights.
There was a moment when Donnarumma, it was similar chances. I can't remember who it was for.
Sesko in the first half.
And Donnarumma stood tall.
It's just impossible to ding the ball over.
Yeah, exactly. If you stand your ground from a technical standpoint, it was poor from him for that goal.
And for some reason, I think because looking at the BBC stats, they had United as having only one shot, a goal in the first half. I'm pretty sure Sesko was on side for that.
He was, yeah.
Minor 1-on-1 as well. So it was their second effort, but I'm not even sure if it made the match of the day highlights, because when you're that tight to Donnarumma, it's so difficult. It's nigh on impossible to get the ball past him. You need to be 2 or 3 yards away, so you've got that space to actually play the ball past him. And with the save he made from Mbeumo in the second half, I think that's one of those saves that, and I said this to my dad, it was better watching it there live than seeing it on TV, because when Mbeumo hit that, I actually said, "Oh, what a," expecting to then say goal.
There's been a few times sitting next
and then he's tipped it wide.
Sitting next to you in a press box when you'll make a noise, and you made a noise at that. And I remember Ahmad's winner against Liverpool FA Cup. It was a similar kind of similar kind of gasp.
Yeah, and when you look at that save again, he's got a good palm to it. It's probably not a great or a world-class save because it was that reachable, but it's close to it because his positioning is perfect. He's read where that ball's going. He's reacted quickly. He's got there. He's got it out of harm's way. He's put it out for a corner. It's not even as like he's palmed it out to the side and United have had the ball in the byline. They can get the ball back in. But he is a world-class goalkeeper. And this is going to be a big problem for United throughout the entirety of the season, because it's like you buy an appetizing filling for a sandwich, but then you've not got the base for it, and even the top half is flaky. So you've not actually really got a sandwich, because the goalkeeper, they've got 3 number 2 goalkeepers. Manchester City have got 2 number 1 goalkeepers. It's not even like United have got a Victor Valdez, David De Gea style dynamic going on there, as brief as that was back in 2015, or Trafford and Donnarumma. And at the other end, although I thought Sesko showed, looked quite accomplished at times yesterday, he still fired blanks, and it's 7 games without a goal. And look, okay, he's not playing for United anymore, and he probably won't play for them again. But Højlund, since he's left the United maelstrom, the fact of the matter is, Højlund had a better start to his United career than Sesko. Højlund had scored by this point. Sesko hasn't.
Had a good first season. Is it time to take Luke Shaw out of the team? Because although we've got slightly into Buendia there, I mean, Shaw was never going to win that foot race with Haaland, was he? Was poor. Yoro was obviously, again, I say culpable in that goal. Docker used his body very intelligently. He's actually got quite decent strength for being someone quite diminutive. Yeah. I mean, Neville touched upon it again, that Amorim in game, he likes to change the centre backs, which I don't think that had a huge bearing on the outcome of the result yesterday. And United have actually played the same back 3 in all 4 games, but they've conceded 7 goals. And I don't think many people have been watching those games, apart from Fulham, where Yoro did have a good game and almost got credited with their goal that day. You're not exactly shouting from the rooftops about how good United centre-backs perform. I thought they've been decent. I actually have, as a trio, I thought they've been good. But I think now it's time, after the game, Harry Maguire to come in for Luke Shaw. That would be the logical.
Maguire's a centre-back. And this is my point. I get that Amorim wants a left-footer to play there, but Aidan Heaven's a left footer. Yes, he's very junior. I still think it's quite overrated. Like, must have a right footer, must have a left footer. I know certain managers can be quite dogmatic about that, and some of these managers tend to end up managing Manchester United. Ten Hag, now Amorim. But Maguire is a centre back by trade. But Amorim has said, I want him in the middle, and if he's going to be in the middle, it's him or De Ligt. So, given how stubborn Amorim is, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't budge, because look at the goalkeeper, the cock-ups he's made this season. He's kept his place in the next game, whether it was Fulham away or City away. But that's part of the problem with Amorim, in that there are certain decisions he's making that are completely on him, whether it's over-promoting Buendia, making him the first choice, whether it's deciding that Luke Shaw should be starting in central defence, which it's got a very limited shelf life, as we saw yesterday. Whether it's not getting the right combination in midfield, and whether it's this is far from his fault, but with the striker situation, not getting a striker in early enough, and when you get that striker in, it's someone who's far too similar to the profile of Højlund, and he's got fewer goals this season than Højlund.
We are going to come on to Amorim, and we'll be a little bit patient because we'll discuss Patrick Dorgu first. I wanted to get into him. But I know it's a priority. But I want to talk about individual
stuff.
I want to talk about individual performances.
I think it belongs on another podcast.
No, because he was heavily involved down that flank on the left. And in this system, obviously Amorim's system is a huge talking point. There is a lot of opportunities for the left wing back. Dorgu finds himself in space a lot of the time, and the ball fell to him several occasions, and it came to nothing time and time again. Dorgu was poor, but I think it's actually unrealistic to expect. He's 20 years old. He's into his obviously second season now. He's come from Lecce. It's such an important position. We've talked about the importance of the wing back roles in Amorim's system. It was Mazraoui and Dorgu starting in the derby. They're not specialist wing backs. Mazraoui said he's a traditional fullback in an interview the other day. Dorgu's a young lad. Those positions are so important to the team. And I mean, there are so many problems, but again, that's another big problem.
It is. And they're not meant to necessarily play as wing backs. They're meant to play as wingers to serve as the striker. And Dorgu's inability to cross yesterday was driving me up the wall. Just from the view of like, how can a professional footballer constantly put balls in that are that bad? And as you just said, the mitigation is that this is someone who's playing for Lecce in January. Did Lecce get relegated last season? They were there or thereabouts, weren't they? So he was playing for relegation fodder at the very least in Italy. And then in January, he moves to Manchester United. And United over-promote him to the point that he's starting pretty much every game by default because he's the only senior, so to speak, left winger. But he's 20. He's not that senior. And people who actually know the player, know the family, they say, yeah, United have over-promoted him. They signed someone who should have been a squad player, but because of the fact that they play this system and they needed someone who was a left footer for that side or someone who was a bit more attack minded, or they felt that they could coax more out from that player, and it was data driven as well. And I think the data told us to sign this player. I think that's going to come back and haunt them as well. This is not Brighton and Hove Albion we're dealing with.
But you are a fan of Moneyball.
I'm guilty as charged there. That is one of the great films of this century. I'd happily do a podcast about Moneyball rather than another Manchester United inquest. But clearly, in certain sports, that has merit. And for the Oakland Athletics, or as the Athletics as they're just now known as, that did work 23 years ago, I think, 23 or 22 years ago. But in terms of clubs like purging their scouting department, saying we're just going to go for data, I think I've not read the piece yet, but on BBC there's a piece about Sheffield United's disaster start to the season, and in the headline it said transfers by AI. And I thought, my God, how could you even go down that route? But clearly they did. And there are clearly some players this calendar year that United have signed where you know that the manager has not had a great deal of input, which can be a worry. But clearly he's having sign off on them or saying, yeah, okay, I'm fine with that. But are these players going to get United to where they want to be and need to be? It's very, very doubtful, because you don't get time at Manchester United, and Benjamin Sesko is pleading for time, and people are pleading for time on his behalf. But I'm sorry, and it's not his fault that United signed him. It's the team that finished 15th last season. You are not going to get time in a team that needs to have a much better season. It's just not going to happen. And this is not a kid we're talking about, Sesko. He's experienced. He's played in Austria. He's played in Germany. He's played at European Championship. He'll play at a World Cup next year. There's a reason why Manchester United spent as much money to sign him. You're not going to get time. So you need to buck up your ideas and get going sooner rather than later.
Okay, so we've arrived at the main course now. We'll have the conversation about Ruben Amorim. It's obviously a talking point again. It's quite incredible, actually, that we're at this point already. Pre-season was incredibly positive. There was a lot of positivity amongst fans, amongst staff at the club, who thought this season would be different. Yeah, we're 4 games into the Premier League, and it's starting again. I'll just read out some quick statistics, which we briefly discussed before we came on air, Samuel. It's the worst start of the season since 1992-93, when United had 4 points from 4 matches, under Sir Alex, of course.
They won the title that season. They ended their title drought that season.
Opta have said they're more likely to be relegated than to, I think, win the league or finish in the top 6 or something like that. Amorim's now got the worst win percentage of any permanent United manager since World War II. And United are bottom of a table consisting of the 17 ever-present top-flight teams dating back to his first game against Ipswich in November. It just seems like we had it with Ten Hag, and these unwanted statistics and records were building up each week. And I mean, they're just sobering on. They're absolutely brutal. When it's down on paper, shocking.
I mean, you mentioned paper, you mentioned World War II. The image of Neville Chamberlain with the white paper, that could be Ruben Amorim waving a white paper with 3-4-2-1 on it. It is quite staggering. The one, I don't know if you mentioned it there, this league table since he took over of ever-present Premier League teams, which is obviously 17 teams, each team has played 31 games, and United at bottom of that because they've won 8 out of those 31 games and they've lost 16 of them, I believe it is. And in the opening weeks of the season, there was the Neil Warnock stat that I think Amorim's got a lower win percentage than Warnock in the Premier League. Then there was the Paul Hart stat in that Amorim has got the fewest number of Premier League wins since Paul Hart, excluding managers with promoted teams after a period of time. But this league table that Opta obviously published yesterday, it really is sobering because United didn't get relegated last season because it was impossible given how poor the 3 promoted clubs were, and I don't think that they're going to necessarily be plumbing those depths again this season. But I wrote it after Grimsby, and I take absolutely no joy in saying it whatsoever because we know how much more beneficial it is for the MEN if United actually are doing well, and particularly if they win a derby. But this is a manager who is past the point of no return. And I've seen it with other Manchester United managers. I've got a pretty decent gauge when they're done. I wouldn't say he's necessarily at that point yet that he's done, but it's not that far off, unfortunately, for him. The way he talks in press conferences at times as well, look, we appreciate his candor, we absolutely do. But yesterday, when he was talking about, if they want to change the system, they need to change the man. And I don't think anybody asked him about his future outright, but he was the one who was bringing up his future. And that just must set off alarm bells at United, because the last thing they need is that chatter around a manager at this stage of a season. And if he does manage to be in charge of the first 9 Premier League games, what will obviously be he'll be compared to is where was Ten Hag at last season after 9 Premier League games, because that was the point when they sacked him and they'd lost 4 out of 9 and they won only 3 games, I think it was. I think it was only 3 wins, which would have been Fulham, Southampton and Brentford. So if that, and look, he's halfway there in terms of the defeats already after only 4 games. So that's another worry. Now, of course, unsurprisingly, the stance from the club at this time is that nothing has changed. He still retains the backing, which you expect them to say. And let's face it, I don't think there's ever going to be a day where any of us will have been told by someone at the club that actually he's on thin ice now, off the record or on the record. But I spoke to someone who knows him quite well, and they said they find it incredible that his position is seemingly not under threat because of the results. And this is the problem. He needed a good start to the season, or a respectable start to the season. They have clearly not had that. They've still not won 2 Premier League games on the spin in a season since May 2024, building up to the FA Cup final with the Newcastle at home and Brighton away were the 2 games, weren't they? And what should really worry him yesterday, I mean, he fronts up in defeat. He always goes over to the supporters, but those 3 tiers were empty, and the feeling of those supporters in that way would have been emptiness. And there was nothing unfamiliar yesterday about seeing United concede at least 3 goals at City, lose a derby, Foden and Haaland on the score sheet, the away end emptying long before full time. But the real worry is that City side was not. It was not peak City. It was not a City team at its optimum. It wasn't the City of yesteryear. But they rolled back the years, and those years were not that long ago anyway. But they did it against Manchester United. And it's a City side that's a work in progress, and they still strolled to victory against United. And that is genuine cause for concern. And even something like, if he's in the dugout against Liverpool at Anfield next month, I looked it up again. Liverpool have very good form for either immediately or rather swiftly seeing off the United manager. Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer, Ten Hag. You can even throw Rangnick into it. I think the longest wait for one of them to be sacked after losing to Liverpool was Van Gaal, and that was 71 days. And that was only because he was given the cup final that season, because he pretty much earned it. So there were some worrying stats already. There are possibly some worrying stats to come. But speaking to some friends who were in the away end yesterday, they just all think that it's inevitable that there's going to be another change of manager before the end of the season. And a friend actually came up with quite it's gallows humour. The analogy he came up with, he said that Amorim's like a pigeon trying to crack a window with his system, in that he'll keep on doing it, stubbornly refusing to accept that he's not going to get a breakthrough there, and just doing more damage to himself. And as amusing as it is, he has got a point there. I just, when they appointed him, I thought, yes, this is a manager I can see United at some point in the future, without putting a time on it, I can see them possibly winning the title under him. I cannot see that now. And ultimately, I think the criteria for Manchester United manager rests on that, because they're too big a club just to think, is this guy going to get us to point A, and then we'll have to get another guy to get us into point B, and then another to get us in, get us to point C. It's got to be, do you believe in this guy to make United title winners at some point in the future? And that's no longer the case.
System isn't working. I'm not sure it is going to work, fortunately. I admire him actually in a way that he is steadfastly standing by it. We discussed Eric Ten Hag and his system at length and what went wrong in that, and I kind of do admire Amorim being really stubborn. But he's not helping himself within that system, is he? He's picking the wrong players for certain roles, and his team selection is interesting often. I always like to think when a manager and a team gets on a roll, they have a settled team. There's always tweaks to the wing-back positions, the pairing in midfield. I'd quite like to see in the coming weeks, next 3 weeks, a settled team, whether that be Maguire, Yoro, and De Ligt in the back three. In the wing-back roles, we don't know the situation with Dalot. You'd have to, as you said, you'd probably have to start Dorgu, wouldn't you? He's probably the guarantee.
Before his first game at Ipswich, I'd be pushing for a man to play there, really, because I don't think Dorgu, and it's not his fault that United over-promoted him, but if he's not good enough to play there, so maybe you have to give Ahmad a try there.
And would you have Dalot on the other side if he was fit then, on the right?
I mean, the silence does rather speak volumes, I suppose. I'm trying to work it out, I'd still, like, stubbornly, if almost in homage to Amorim, I'd probably keep Fernandes in midfield.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that moving forward. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is because in terms of actual practical solutions, we're talking about what has gone wrong and what Amorim can actually do in the next 3 weeks to stop the rot, get results. And I think having a settled team, for me, is very important.
Well, it's got to the point now, and unfortunately, United have done this before.
Drop by in there as well.
Well, drop by in there, but they've done this before, that with having no European football, and they've obviously talked this up, this can be an advantage, this can be an advantage. Already, they're turning it into a disadvantage because they're incurring negative results or bad results, and then that wait for the next game, it just festers, when really, if you've got a European game, you've got a game to come up quickly, or a League Cup tie, you can get a win, get confidence back up, and then you can channel that into the league game at the weekend. And they don't have that now. And they were never going to have it particularly often, but they cocked it up at Grimsby to the point, obviously, that we've been deprived of a midweek cup tie this month as well. And I that was my fear as well, that Newcastle, obviously in the 2 seasons they qualified for the Champions League, had no Europe. Chelsea and Leicester winning the league, of course, had no European football to contend with. Liverpool nearly winning the league in 2013-14, had no European football. The one team that actually came close to making a pig's ear of having no European football were United in 2014-15, when they just barely got over the line with the top 4. They finished 4th, but they won one of their final 6 league games, and they didn't win a trophy that season. So they didn't really take advantage of it. And there's a very real risk that they won't take advantage of it again this time. But I completely agree with you. They do need a settled team. The back three has been settled, although out of principle, I've disagreed with Shaw being in that back three. But the die was cast when Amorim said to us in Chicago that, he's world class, and then he started. You could tell by the pattern of his selections and his picks in pre-season that Shaw was going to start the season if he was fit. But you can't say he doesn't have the players, because I think Neville made that argument. They've spent, how much have they spent? They've spent £250 million, I think, under Amorim already, and that's this calendar year. You cannot be playing that card. But yeah, they have made mistakes with their recruitment already. The goalkeeping situation has been mismanaged. I don't agree with the choice of striker they've gone with. They needed a midfielder. They didn't sign a midfielder. So they've spent a lot. Again, they've spent a lot of money, but there are fundamental issues with their recruitment. But it's a case of tough luck. You've been backed in the transfer market. You've got to try and find solutions there. You've got a 25-man squad. So yeah, try and rearrange the parts, try and look at new solutions, and get a win on Saturday as well.
Amorim desperately need wins. It's Chelsea next at Old Trafford, then it's to Brentford and Sunderland. So there's 3 big games there before. There are always big games, but before the next international break. Obviously, international breaks are synonymous with managerial changes. It does offer clubs a chance to assess the situation, potentially make a change. They're just so important, aren't they, these next few weeks? Because as you said, Amorim, after overseeing a 15th place finish, he needed a good start. United haven't had it, and that just increases the pressure on these matches so much.
There's always pressure at United because of the scrutiny and the demand, and certainly from pre-season, there was an element of expectation as well that they'd have quite a good season.
You said 4th, didn't you? I think in your prediction, and I said 5th.
Top 5. I think I said. It was a bit of a
Champions League.
I said top 5. They could, yeah.
I thought they'd finish 5th Champions League. So we're on the same page anyways, roughly with our predictions.
And look, the situation is eminently salvageable. They've got 34 more games to turn around their season, but the start they've made it's extremely disconcerting, because even when they've played well, they lost to an Arsenal team that didn't really perform and defended a goal that they scored that was gifted to them in the 13th minute. Burnley game, first half in particular, they were very good, but they needed an own goal to go 1-0 up in that, and eventually needed a penalty to win that game in the 97th minute. So that maybe there'll be a bolt from the blue, and they'll produce a performance and a win that will captivate the match goers and really restore belief in an instant. But it would have to be a bolt from the blue, because I don't think anybody is necessarily I don't think anybody foresees that. And a friend, a season ticket holder, she sent me a screenshot of the upcoming fixtures this morning and said, I can only see us beating Sunderland out of those ones coming up, because not only have they got Liverpool away on the horizon, they've also got Brighton at home on the horizon, and Brighton obviously always win at Old Trafford. They've won the last 3 games at United.
Is there an element of individual mistakes? Yeah, because you look at that game yesterday, obviously there's structural problems and Amorim has to take responsibility ultimately, but there's a lot of individual errors, isn't there? And sometimes you look at matches this season, you think if that hadn't happened or that hadn't happened, it would have been a different result. I know that's I've just reflected on what I've just said. It's a Michael Owen thing to say, but there's a lot of errors. There's a lot of individual errors that players should not be making.
But he picks Bayindir, he picks Luke Shaw, he picks Fernandes in midfield, which I can understand, but you're going to have to tweak things to ensure that he's not the one chasing back all the time necessarily. And that with the striker, because the lack of goals is clearly a problem again, and automatically you look in the direction of the striker. I said it, and it'd be great for United's sake, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong if Sesko turns out to be a roaring success at the club. But I would not be surprised if he turns out to be Højlund Mark II. I just thought that was such a. Not only did they go for too similar profile of striker, the manner in which they ended up with him, in that he's the fourth choice at least after Delap, Gyökeres, Watkins, but they wanted to sign Delap for £30 million. They've spent more than double on Sesko. So of course, over the course of the season, Sesko and Delap are going to get compared, and Delap has not set the world alight at Chelsea. He's injured, isn't he? And he actually might be their backup striker for the season, which, I think if you're Sesko, you're secretly hoping that he's going to be, just to render that comparison moot.
Was it not the case of, I agree, I think in an ideal world, they would have signed a way more experienced striker. Ollie Watkins was logical. Was he really attainable? Could United have signed Watkins this summer? It seemed like...
They could have, but they'd have been probably spending a similar amount to what they paid for Sesko on someone who's going to turn the 30 in December, which is why they thought, no.
The market was difficult. I do have some sympathy in that sense.
But this is the thing. Like, I'm sure, and this isn't a criticism of you at all, because like you sound like United press officer there. The market was difficult.
I'm looking at all
but a lot of
angles.
Strikers were on the move, and also you go back 2 years. The whole thing about Harry Kane, and we mentioned it so many times, but he left Bayern Munich. Sorry, he left Tottenham that summer. Tottenham had to sell him that summer. There's no way. I refuse to believe that United would have got nowhere just because they had to deal with Daniel Levy. And you can imagine United saying now, like, it's sod's law for us that Daniel Levy's now no longer at Tottenham. It would have been great if he left Tottenham 3 years ago or something like that. But they could have got Kane 2 years ago, and that would have solved that problem, because I think he is one of the few players on the planet who'd have been certain to be a success at United.
So given the choice, let's say Watkins was available for the money that they invested in Sesko, which was £66 million. They translate to roughly around that. The initial,
it was just over 70 million.
So a £70 million package. If they could have signed Watkins for that price, would you have gone ahead with that deal? I suppose at the end of the day, we're journalists and there's fans out there. We're not accountants.
It's easy to say now, but I would have.
Would you have gone for that package?
For 70, I'd tried to negotiate it down a little bit, and maybe you can dilute it just for the optics at times. Like Mbumo, it's 65 million, rising to 71 million, something similar to that. But given the choice, if someone says, here's £70 million, you can sign this player from RB Leipzig, or you can sign that player from Aston Villa, and either of those clubs will accept it, who would you take? I would take Watkins.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at it through a prism of kind of a sporting director and long-term and value, but at the end of the day, United needed an experienced goal scorer. They needed someone who could score now, and I guess you're right, Watkins was that player.
In that statement, Jason Wilcox mentioned data, and this is a guy that Sir Jim Ratcliffe has said has got the best pair of eyes in football. I know it's still early in the season, but I think Ratcliffe is wrong on that.
We'll just end in a moment, but you said before about the kind of the point of no return for Amorim. He's looked increasingly downbeat after post-match, during post-match interviews, when he's discussed his future. Your prediction for the next few weeks, Samuel, will he survive the October international break? Because we're already in a very similar situation to last season, where the pressure started on Ten Hag. The conversation was already there because of the season before. The difference is Ten Hag won the FA Cup. United lost Amorim lost the Europa League. Ten Hag survived the October international break to be sacked after West Ham.
I just had a strange message there, almost as if we'd missed something whilst we've been on radio silence. I hope it's nothing. What was the question again? Sorry, will he be...
Prediction for the next few weeks in terms of Amorim's future, because Ten Hag survived the October international break. We've discussed the fixtures that are next. How do you see it unfolding?
Christ, I really don't hazard a guess. I really wouldn't. With the Chelsea game, and I said to you yesterday, I think when I saw the Chelsea team that started at Brentford on Saturday, I thought that's remarkably underwhelming for the amount of money they've spent in the past 3 years. And of course, there are certain players who are coming back from injury or not quite integrated yet, and Cole Palmer's the standout example of that. But I wouldn't be surprised. 5:30 kickoff at Old Trafford, decent atmosphere, hopefully a pretty good atmosphere. The need to win a game. It is a big game because you're coming up against one of the big hitters in the league as well. It wouldn't surprise me if United turned it on and got a result or got a spirited win. I don't think they're going to start playing champagne football and beating Chelsea 3-0 or 4-0. But however they win, they just need to win on Saturday. They need a result that is going to capture the imagination, fuel the belief among the supporters, just excite the supporters, allow the supporters to leave with a spring in their step. Because the Burnley game didn't do that. I thought after that, sometimes when you get a late win, and Liverpool have obviously had a lot of them recently, when you get an added time win, it can feel more meaningful than if you've just thrashed a team. I didn't think that was the case with the Burnley game. If United thrashed Burnley, as they should have done, 4-0 or 5-0, that would have felt like much more of a statement, as exaggerated. Maybe I'm overstating there because Burnley have not long been promoted, but that would have been much closer to a statement than needing an added time penalty to win it. But with the Chelsea game on Saturday, it's a very different dynamic because Chelsea are a demonstrably better side than Burnley. So it's a case of just win, but if they can do it whilst exciting supporters, and they had a couple of seasons ago when Ten Hag was under the cosh, they played quite well against Chelsea, and McTominay got a couple of goals just before Christmas time. And that was a good win in that, although it was quite a narrow win, a 2-1 win, they created a lot of chance that night. They were on the front foot. They were intense. It was a good reaction to what had happened at Newcastle a few days earlier, where they were so supine in that game, where they only lost 1-0 to it was Anthony Gordon's goal. But I've also got to take some credit for that Chelsea performance because, of course, it was the pre-match press conference. I and a few others were banned from attending, so that clearly reinforced the siege mentality and had a knock-on effect on their win. But then, of course, at the weekend they got battered 3-0 by Bournemouth.
They need a fast start on Saturday because if they go behind and they concede in the first half to Chelsea, Old Trafford, you can just imagine the groans, can't you? They'll be coming from the stands. Yeah,
look. I say it selfishly. We could all do without another managerial change before the clocks go back, or just as the autumn leaves are starting to fall.
I think we
don't want it.
Everyone wants Amorim to succeed, don't they? I mean, the way it comes across with us, it's brilliant. Fans have really took to him, but everything right now just points to him not succeeding, unfortunately. So hopefully there's a response in the next 3 weeks before
if he
the
succeeds,
October.
It'll be a hell of a story. It will demand many books written about it.
Maybe that Amazon documentary will finally happen.
Yes.
That was being talked to the club. Right. Thanks very much for your time, Samuel.
Thank you, Steve.
We'll be back later in the week to look ahead to the Chelsea game. Thanks for listening. Take care.